very happy to be back after 2 years. We will discuss this morning, get a refresher on the topics of 2 years ago, and I will pick one or two things up again. The topic ADHD is always on the forefront. I will go into detail with that. There are a couple of questions that you have sent me in advance, and I will answer those as well. And when you have contributions or questions, please ask them right away. I would like to not give a real speech very well.
Ja. So, okay. Das ist aber unhandlich etwas. Okay, gut. Gut. Ich starte mit dem Zitat von dem ersten.
I'd like to start with a quote from a professor for child psychology. Dates back to the 60s, and that is on the importance of communication, regardless of what communication looks like, whether it's verbal or non-verbal. If I cannot communicate, all there's left, I need to use hands, feet, and teeth. So the fewer communication options there are, the more they will tend to use hands, feet, and teeth, but that applies to both children with and without language. Coming back to language, I'd like to point out Mr. Wittgenstein. The boundaries of my language are the boundaries of my world. The more detailed language develops, the more I can imagine. And language makes me a part of my societal environment, and that is not only spoken language, but the various forms of communication, sign language, image cards. This is what we'll deal with. I will go back to the topics of 2024. Then I will say something on the phenotypes of behavior. What challenging behavior do we mainly see in Jacobson? What are the correlations there? I will go into the topic of raising your children, and we can also go into specific areas of problems depending on what you are interested in. I would also like to do something on oppositional defiance, depending on what you're interested in. We have talked about self-regulation, which is a central topic. And you can assume when children have issues, then that always plays a role, the quality to self-regulate, to calm down, to do something that you want to do, but to then not do it. Second topic is social empathy and understanding, and an important developmental step is that the children eventually learn that there is a difference between current situation and the relationship. So if mom is arguing with me, then she still loves me, and the same way, the other way around, when I'm angry at mom, I still love her. And if you don't make that connection, or if you don't realize that, then you will take everything personally. If you're not of my opinion, then you're against me. That is an important step in development, and this cognitive development, I will also talk about that in connection with ADHD. to take an action plan to take targeted action that is general areas of developmental psychology. Here are other areas, but I will not go into detail there. Then self-efficacy, the experiences of one's own impact, is a very central part of development. Already at 10 weeks old, this plays a role. They're only 10 weeks old. Infants, they experience their own impact as positive even though they have no understanding of the concept yet. It is assumed that if you have sufficient experience of your own impact, then you get a positive image of self and you trust your own capabilities. The opposite is a feeling of helplessness. It demands too much of me and I feel helpless, and that feels uncomfortable if you are in a situation and don't know a way out. Feel helpless. In this connection, on Sunday, you will hear some things on neuropsychology, if I'm not mistaken. And there, the executive functions play a role. What I said in the beginning is a development psychological model, and this is a neuropsychological model where only certain areas of the brain are evaluated. This is not criticism, but they simply focus on another area. And capabilities that are represented in the cortex and that lead to develop cognitive functions, that you have your own brake that you can step on to stop certain behaviors, and to have a working memory, being given a task that you don't forget it while solving it. But that is something we will see on Sunday in more detail. This is the prefrontal cortex, that is this area here, to the very front of the brain. And it is known of injuries that when they have had injuries in this area, then their personality changes. And also digestion in kids with ADHD or with well-diagnosed ADHD, that also is in this area of the brain. Take a boy at school, for example. He is aggressive, overly active, easily actionable. The child is simply agitated, and eventually the teacher is annoyed, and then I start expecting the boy to be agitated again. So there is a negative expectation towards the child. Over time, you assume that they do that on purpose. The teacher always argues with me because he doesn't tolerate me, because he doesn't like me. For the teacher, it means I have a problematic pupil in school. So they both put each other in a drawer, and then it becomes difficult when it is in that correlation, in that problematic. That leads to the boy being even more agitated, the teacher reacting even more, and that is a self-escalating system that becomes worse and worse. You assign roles to people in your surrounding, and in the end you have a system that spirals downward and becomes more and more negative. I had one student with 40 entries into the class book, and it was intended that he left school to change to a school for children with special needs, but he wanted to stay in class with his students or with his peers. And he then decided to participate more in education. And I asked him what subject in math. He wants to ask twice a question, and the teacher didn't realize because he was of the conviction, he was convinced that he had a problematic student. And that doesn't mean that he is a bad teacher, but small changes, you don't realize them anymore. And once you have classified a student as a problematic student, it is difficult to leave that behind. And over time, that charges your relation. Eventually, the student becomes unbearable. The children becomes more difficult, everyone becomes more difficult, and you find this pattern everywhere. And that is not only in school, but everywhere, and it is quite common. It just mustn't get enough space. And if this happens, it becomes more. You get more of the same, you repeat the same samples, the same patterns over again. And you then get the feeling that you're always annoyed and you're happy the student is ill one day, but it applies to both of them. Both of them are annoyed, and that is not a good basis for their relationship. And if you use words like typical, always, never, that was clear to me, I knew in advance, if you take them along that will lead to trouble, why can it not go a different way for once? And then you are in a negative circle. And then it is good to reflect how to leave that negative circle behind. It is normal patterns, but when they take too much space and become your standard, then it's problematic. So you can say that the entire system became challenging. Think of your partnership. If you make accusations all the time, then of course your relationship deteriorates, so you can not only solve the problem with the children alone. And in coercive family processes, it makes sense to get external help, to leave that circle behind. The difficulty is that for a long time you yourself don't realize that you are already in that negative circle. Things go wrong, things repeat. Every time I ask my child to do something, there is an argument and the things repeat. And for a long time you simply don't realize. And that is good if sometimes you wonder what it is like in family. How does our child feel as a part of our family? What is its opinion of us as a parent? You can, of course, ask yourself that question. And that is reflections on the relationship level. And then the other things become important. How to strengthen self-regulation. How can I strengthen my child that reaches its limits very quickly, that it calms down, that I can have a confirmatory approach. We want to regulate things directly after an argument, that things get okay again, but it is important that the child self-regulates first and then we talk about that. I make sure that my child learns to wait for half a minute. It is small steps that you do here. you can also for yourself have a look. Am I in one of those circles? You can tick the boxes that apply to you. And it is not about whether you are good parents or not. That is not the topic of this self-reflection. It is really only about looking at the situation for yourself. And maybe we can make that available to you as well. That should not be an issue. Raising a child with developmental risk can be a challenge for relationship in a family, because it is a challenge. It is known that when giving birth to a child with disability, the separation rate in the first years of life of the child is much higher. So that parents often separate after they've had a disabled child. So it is important to react early on if the child's issues lead to tensions between the parents. It is not uncommon, it is not wrong. The question is only on how to react on that. So how much time do the parents have to actually take care of their relationship and to talk about their relationship? Are we on the same page in terms of relationship? How much free space do we have as parents for ourselves? Is there some room for ourselves, as difficult as it sounds? Last time, we also talked about communication. Talking about relationship is a form of meta-communication. As soon as you make allegations, you are communicating. When you talk about why we argue all the time, that is the level of meta-communication. These problems can only be solved on the meta-communicative level. As long as you stay on the allegations, it will only get worse. So, parents, both as parents and as a couple, of course it is their task to look after the children and to raise their children. Children raise their parents also, even if that is not their formal task. And a partnership relationship needs care. We will do an example on that immediately. How do we take care of our relationship? What helps us in not resigning? What helped you to stay committed, to not resign with this hard challenge? Where do you recharge? Where do you get your power from? Because eventually all batteries are empty. And what helps us in keeping the head afloat? How can I recharge my own batteries? Do we take care of our friends, or do we live our friendships, continue to live our friendships? So how much space is left for our friends? This is a picture, an image of a group where we had children that faced separation, divorce. Child makes a picture of being handed over from one parent to other. You always have to scream. I don't scream, and the child says stop. We would now like to make an example. I'd like to have a mother and a father, preferably from different families, and you don't have to do a lot. You would simply have to read something. I have prepared everything. It's just for the sake of exemplification. So we have one mother stepping forward. We would need another dad. You only need to read something up. out, nothing else. And we have a volunteer, thank you. It is a very simple situation. Let me show you briefly, then you can all see. I will show you what it's about. If he doesn't have a microphone, I'm sorry, but so you saw it. You could also take care of our daughter for once. You're leaving her upbringing entirely to me. I don't think that's right. You know I have to work a lot and therefore often don't get home until late. I would also prefer to have more time. Even when you're here, you don't pay any attention to her. Isn't our daughter important to you? After all, you're her father. If I concern myself with her, then in your eyes, it's not right anyway. You've always have been quick to make excuses. I have never been able to do anything right by you. That is so real. Where does it continue? You've jumped ahead. No, they've read it all. We've done it all. So you've had it all. But we have had it all, yes. This is a very small example. If that happens once or twice, then it's no issue. But if it happens constantly, then you are running into trouble. And everyone explains their own problems with the character of the other, and then there is no solution. There's only a deterioration of the system, the situation. And then it is important to discuss with each other on a different level. It's no one to blame. That is something you react to. It happens, and you stay on this level, and you don't speak of your relationship. This is about the parents as parents, and here it's about the partnership. Always and never are always related to the partnership itself. That also plays a role. You've always been quick to make excuses, and I've never made anything right by you. That is statements on the partnership, and in the beginning you have statements on the parents as parents. So thank you to the volunteers. Moving to the behavioral phenotypes. So is there a genetic risk for certain behavioral issues and mental disorders in connection with Jacobson? There are syndrome-specific behavioral phenotypes. It is known for children with Fragile X that they often have severe ADHD. For Leschneien, it is known that they severely injure themselves, so the risk for that is increased due to the genetic syndrome. Wolfgang Janssen was a very well-known professor for pedagogic of mentally disabled people, and he called it an increased risking pattern. So it is not a guarantee to happen, but it is more likely. And with Jacobson, you assume that they have development delay, learning disability, difficulty with reading and writing, discrepancy in speaking and language understanding. So the risk of that is increased. It does not mean that it has to automatically be like that simply because you're diagnosed with Jacobson. They're hyperactive and impulsive with symptoms of an ADHD. And in their social emotional behavior, there are socially very active children and also very introvert children. An emotional immaturity is a valuing term. If an 8-year-old boy in a jealousy situation with their brother, the boy reacts as if he were 2 years old, that is one of the situations of immaturity. The risk for autism and autistic traits is increased. Do you want to go into detail on autism? I have brought something, then we can do that. The question also is, what is autism? How do you diagnose that, for example? That is things fine motor skills. It is known that movement stimulates the brain, that cognitive features develop better. The hand is the tool of the spirit, so hand and brain influence each other. It is assumed that once man started to walk on 2 feet and the hand became free, that led to brain development, and everything that enables the child to move around is helpful for the brain development. But there can also be faulty diagnosis. Maybe a child keeps stimulating itself to feel good, and it is then wrongfully diagnosed as an hyperactivity syndrome. But there is a difference. If boredom is extremely unpleasant to me, I stimulate myself, I go overboard, and then I feel well. There is a different dynamic. So it makes sense to behave like that from the child's perspective. And if someone cannot speak, it is difficult to get that message across. So maybe they are ADHD diagnosed, even though it is something entirely different. So it is very important to closely look at that. And with the challenging behavior, it is important to look closer, and it is also important to take a psychotherapeutic approach, also for ADHD, that have show good results. I've said that 2 years ago also. A disability is not an excuse for bad behavior. If it were an excuse, we would deny people with disabilities the ability to learn. You can learn to at least behave to some extent, despite your disability. So you're not someone who is incapable of anything, but even you can develop. There are various styles of upbringing, that was discussed at least, but you cannot sharply separate them from each other. So a democratic style of upbringing can have very positive results. Parents who react to their children, it was realized that a long time ago there was investigation. How do children react when the mother freezes and doesn't react anymore? And the child are then deeply stressed with the mother not showing any reaction, a still face setting. that stresses the child tremendously. And when parents play with their children and then they take the smartphone because they get a message, it was realized that they do the same, that the children are stressed all of a sudden. You should pay attention to that, especially with small children, to dose this in a way that it doesn't happen too often. You have also realized that small children are of the opinion that the smartphone is more important than the child itself. Not to oppose technology, but it is important to react to the child, that it is an interruption to the relationship at that moment. Delicate, sensitive behavior is to realize the signals the child sends, to interpret them correctly, and to react promptly and appropriately, because that is what shapes the relationship, that the parents are the safe harbor for the child. And it also helps the child learn to self-regulate following their parents' examples. How do you deal with limits in the family? Because there's no level. This is necessary, not too few and not too many rules and limits what you apply in family. It is important also for children to know what is possible and what cannot be done, because they need that orientation. Children wish for strong parents, even if strong parents are in their way, irritating. If the parent never stands their ground, then eventually the child will despise the parents. So if you say no and put a consequence on the table, but then don't follow through, the child will start to despise you because you never are true to your word. And are you aware of the hierarchical structure in family? Parents have tasks that children do not have. Parents are responsible for their children. The children are not responsible for their parents. It's a hierarchy in the positive sense of the meaning. And there are things we need to ask our children to do. They cannot develop on their own. We need to demand something from them, to charge something them with something. When can we expect our children to separate from us, for example, in connection with kindergarten? How do we prepare them that they manage to deal with this separation, this daily separation, that mommy and daddy go to kindergarten and then the child stays and the parents leave? This is the conclusion. And of course, with children and grown-ups, it is the grown-ups who are responsible to interrupt these circles. In a couple, it's both, or with friends, it's both who have that responsibility. But in the parent-child situation, it is the parents. And especially with certain issues, autism, ADHD, it is important to explain and to elucidate. One example from Lebenshilfe, a caregiver had a young boy under her care. He had autism. They went to the playground and everything, but she never heard of autism, and they had an issue with the conflict when all of a sudden they wanted to leave, or she needed to leave, she needed to go. The child was desperate and in despair, and the caregiver overreacted and did not understand what happened, which is why you educate the parents and tell them how does a child function with ADHD, with autism. It's not just general understanding. Another item is that there is diagnostic difficulties if it's about therapy. Compulsive disorder is not recognized because the disability is overshadowing it. You assume it is and the other difficulty is the problem of communicated, and if the child is language impaired, they cannot express what is happening. So you have the overshadowing situation where the disability overshadows the psychological problem, and the other is underreporting, which is why in therapy you need the environment to fill in from parents, from other people. Children often have difficulties to localize where they have pain, where they feel pain. To communicate that is difficult for them. So in therapy, the situation is you have both the guardian and the social environment, school, kindergarten, that you include them in the therapeutic situation and session. Briefly on psychotherapy, and I'm part of the group for psychotherapy for people with cognitive impairments, and our practicing colleagues need to open to these patients. There are enough pieces of advice that indicate that psychotherapy helps, and there is a list of practicing colleagues in Baden-Württemberg to whom you can report. It is not very dense, but we are currently asking more colleagues to be willing to offer spots because they are in charge technically. Questions on this? Or on what we have covered so far? And you've seen it was typical situations, and that is an important point for you. And I'm interested where you recharge, for example. No microphone, no. One moment, otherwise the interpreters will not hear. So on slide it said something on eating behavior. Is it the situation that eating will improve over time? For us, this is a very new situation. Or does that vary per child? It is for very, very small children. This does not mean that all children with Jacobson have issues with nutrition and with eating, but there is a risk also with bodily impairments also being present. Having a look for very small children, infants 0 to 3 years old, there you can have circles where children refuse to eat, where you have to fight for the child to actually take in food. And mothers who usually deal with that, they are desperate because they think, but my child needs to eat, and that charges the system more and more. But that can happen with any other infant as well. But the risk in Jacobson children is increased. And if swallowing is an issue for the child, then of course that risk is increased. And then you can have issues with eating. What is not uncommon is that children for certain amounts of time only eat very certain things. Do you have a special question on that? It was mainly about my child because she is facing this eating disorder and she is also being fed through a tube. And I was wondering whether it generally stops with the children. I've seen other children that have been fed through the tube and eventually it was removed. But can I at least look out to an improvement, or do I need to realize that it stays like this forever? That is very unlikely, that it will stay like that forever. And the other issue is, or the other point is, if you already charge the eating situation, then it is important on how to discharge that situation, how to release tension from that situation. I have also training for therapeutic treatment for infants 0 to 3 years old, and I was in a family where the child refused to eat fully. He wouldn't eat at all. And the situation was, he was maybe a year old, and he would not eat at the table, but in the kitchen, because he would constantly throw food on the floor, and he was also distracted. And when he was distracted, then the spoon went in, but it was not. The mother was desperate. She was not a bad mother, but it was fight for food. And the situation was, no, he needs to eat with the others at the table, and as long as he is drinking, there's no issue that you need to worry. Release pressure from the situation, and the child needs to realize that food is something to enjoy and not as a fight for power. But that is something you can influence pretty well. The other situation is if you have bodily issues, if swallowing is an issue, and the child is refusing solid food because it is painful for the child to swallow. Another question? Jacobson children are delayed in their development, usually. Will their development eventually stop, or do they have lifelong learning just like any other people? Of course, they learn throughout their life. And the question is only what level can you reach? But of course, they keep learning and it never stops. Also, changes in the brain never stop. Development is always possible. The question is only, what is the limit? In language development, you may come to a limit, and in other areas also. You always need to look forward. You always need to look toward the development. Don't look on the deficits, look on the possibilities. There's further questions. Maybe in French.
La question que je vais poser concerne... Tu peux le dire en anglais. Moi, je parlais de la maîtresse. C'est bon? Attends.
Wir haben 4 Sprachen und im Moment sind nur 3 hier. Ja. Ich kann nicht eine doppelt besetzen. Ja. Das geht nicht. Also,
ist es vielleicht einfacher, wenn Stefan? Okay. Yeah? Okay. Yeah.
Ok. Oui, moi je voulais poser une question sur la motricité des enfants atteints du syndrome.
I'd like to ask something about the motor skills of my child. I would like to know if all children with Jacobsen have problems with their motor skills. And if those problems can ever be solved. Motorik.
Es geht um Bewegung. Deze. Nee, niet draaien. Alleen op de A-knop klikken. Ja.
Moment, kann jemand auf dem deutschen Kanal einmal kurz sprechen oder ist das hier irgendwie... Hören Sie nicht? Moment. Okay. Gut. Okay, da war jetzt irgendwie der deutsche Kanal nicht angekommen.
If it's about physical things, I'm not really the expert. But what we have seen is that early movement therapy, ergotherapy, helps. It's a specific question also for the colleague from neuropsychology to ask them this question because she knows better. But early ergotherapy, physiotherapy is helpful. If it eventually grows out, I do not know, but it improves a lot. Also, logopedic speech therapy helps a lot. And ergotherapy, the earlier the better. So that be something that is helpful, of course.
Frage, sollen wir vielleicht...
Question, do we maybe ask Camille and Olivier to translate that briefly? Then we don't need to switch channels all the time. I can also ask the question in English. Hallo, ich habe mich gefragt, wann es relevant ist, den Autismus zu diagnostizieren und die... Oh, sorry.
Year-old child, and I have told about the doctors that in the Jacobsen there was a lot of autism, so I was wondering if, I was wondering if we could have a diagnosis so we could work on this behavior problem.
Yeah.
But the medicine always told us that it was too early. So when can we consider that Jacobsen gives delays, and when can we consider that we have a real autism diagnosis?
At 1 year, it is too early, that is correct. You cannot diagnose for sure. I think it starts at an age of 3 that you can have examinations where certain behaviors become more apparent. With ADHD, you would not do that at 1 year old. You cannot say anything about that. There was a time when it was said not before they go to school. For autism, it is much too early at 1 year. Things might change still, and it is eventually not autism. I go into one question that was collected, but there are other questions in the room, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I thought I would just add a little bit about the autism story. We published a paper several years ago now showing about 2/3 of boys and 1/3 of girls fulfill the diagnosis for autism in Jacobson syndrome. The other thing I wanted to mention is Jessica Facchetti, one of the parents of a child, Petey, herself is a therapist for autism, and she's given some very nice talks, which I'm pretty sure are on YouTube, that you should be able to access in English, to learn more about therapies for children with Jacobson syndrome and autism.
Thank you. Another question in the room? Ja, nee, is goed. Doe jij Duits? Of doe ik Duits?
Is zo. Vaak naar.
My daughter likes seeing videos on YouTube. Does that influence her behavior? Do you have tips and tricks? So when she has problem behavior, let her just watch a video so she gets quiet again. Do you have tips for that?
Was meinen Sie Filmen in
What do you mean with film? In what direction do they go?
wo über
Where they inform about the topic of autism, or?
Gaat meer om van.
No, she just keeps hanging on YouTube Shorts, watches it repetitively, and we want to get her off that, and that's difficult to get her away from it.
Ja, wat voor.
How does that influence her?
Dochter.
Son or daughter?
Tochter.
Ja.
Und wie alt?
It's a daughter. How old? Next week, 8 years old.
Festlegen, wo es geht, und würde es begrenzen. Und das Problem ist, dass wenn Sie das einführen, also kann man ihr das verständlich machen, dass es versteht, wenn Sie das machen?
Ja,
Wir sind die Eltern, wir machen das so.
das ist schwierig.
Das heißt, der Widerstand wird erstmal hochgehen. Ganz normale Reaktion. Das heißt,
Ja, maar dat zit er zelf om te draaien. Dat is slim genoeg voor.
also das heißt, es kommt erstmal Widerstand.
Ja.
Das ist eine normale Reaktion, das zeigt, dass sie auf die Veränderung reagiert. Aber halt erstmal mit Widerstand. Das heißt, da müssen Sie durchhalten, bis sie sich daran gewöhnt hat, dass es so ist. Viele Veränderungen sind Gewöhnungsprozesse, bei uns genauso. Wir gewöhnen uns an manche Dinge. Also ich würde klare Regelungen treffen und überlegen Sie sich, wie viel Zeit okay wäre, und das machen Sie dann. Und das würde ich aber auch lassen, also auch nicht als Bestrafung nehmen oder so, dann darfst du heute nicht, das würde ich lassen. So viel Zeit am Tag und mehr gibt es nicht. Das wird am Anfang schwierig, da müssen Sie durchhalten. Wenn Sie gerade angeschlagen sind, dann vertagen Sie das. Wenn Sie genug Kraft haben, das durchzuhalten, dann machen Sie es. Ja, aber es ist wichtig, und Ihre Tochter soll ja auch sehen, dass Sie das bestimmen. Sie ist keine 15, da müsste man es aushandeln. Ja. Also scheuen Sie sich nicht, sich durchzusetzen. Wenn man Kinder fragt, wer hat in der Familie zu bestimmen, dann sagen alle die Eltern, auch wenn sie selber bestimmen wollen. Ja. Okay. Noch eine Frage, sonst machen wir hier diese Frage, die gekommen ist. Umgang mit Trauer zum Beispiel war so eine Frage.
How can you deal with grief? So the question here is that the child in question has difficulties communicating in the first place, and that makes it very difficult. And when you can look pictures of the deceased together, remember positive events. You can light a candle and put the picture next to that candle. Can you go visit the grave? Was the child present in the funeral, in the burial? And there are picture books on the topic of grief. So there is an option to deal with the topic, even if it is difficult or made more difficult due to limited communication. And it also is important. She is tense, she pulls her hair on others, pinching, and as a reaction to her grief, to leave her and let her do that, because she needs to be able to express her grief. You also can ask, is the child afraid? There were people in the group who died, and what happens when my parents die? Is that making the child more tense? Because then it will eventually realize that also other people will die. Is there anger on those that have parted because they have left me alone? Is aggression involved? A couple of years ago, one of my best friends died very soon. He left me alone. He left me hanging, and I was very, very angry at the same time as I was grieving. And for this child, there is a physical expression of grief because it has no other means to express grief. And that is an important issue. So accepting individual forms of expression, changes in behavior, physical expression of grief. And you need to make room for grief. So I would try in this situation to regulate that with the pinching and pulling hair of others, but not with the idea that it needs to stop very fast, and instead to address it. Remembering the deceased is an important topic. What do I want to remember? What's the time? 10:24. Couple minutes before we go into break. Different question. Question of a boy who is looking forward to Germany. How can I leave that EIEIO state behind? The question here is how to strengthen the capability to calm down. I cannot switch it off, but I can strengthen capabilities of calming down. Let me show you a small example. No microphone, no tone. Very easy. What's important is when you do something like that, do the children understand what it's about? Some children don't have this differentiation. They are either over-ecstatic or calm, and they go through the roof very fast. And it is important to teach the children that there's different levels of excitement. You can also be a little excited, a little more excited, very excited. And this is a very, very easy example that you can do. Take your hands, put them calmly next to you. You can also close your eyes if you want to. I'll do the same. And now you make a fist as strong as you can. Hold it tight, and now you let go. And we do that a couple of times. And you pay attention to that difference in the tension and relaxation. Once again, holding, open your hands, and how you realize that difference. Something like that. That is a very, very easy thing. It doesn't mean that it will lead to something, but some children, they understand that there is a difference between tension and relaxation, and that there's different levels of excitement. The next step would be take 10 Lego blocks, put them down, and we now visualize excitement. We put 10 on top of each other, and now you flex your fist as strong as you can. Now we take 5 and you flex to 5, 1, 2, 3, so that the child learns to recognize different levels of tension. And that is one example of how to deal with that situation. Whether that is helpful in an overexcited situation, it can help, but you never know in advance. And you can support them because those blocks, those pieces of Lego, they are visible. Put them on top of each other and show me how excited you are. And what also is good is a change of site. Go to a different place. Within the apartment, you go to a location, to a place that is equivalent, that means calmness. One example, an autistic child in kindergarten was angered, threw himself on the floor, hit around. The first step was, it's not anger, it is desperation, because it was too much for him, this excitement. So we decided to take a bond approach to create a safe haven, and they went to that safe haven and looked at picture books, and not in stressful situations is the first step, to anchor this safe haven. So especially not in stressful situations. Desperate situations went down a little, and when the colleague realized, oh, he's starting to overexcite again, then they would go to that safe haven. Those fits have gone down. He didn't hit his head to the floor anymore. It was not as often anymore. So we have given him the idea, we will create a space for you to calm down, where you're not overly demanded and over-exaggerated, And eventually he said the first word when he wanted something. That is one option, where there is one chair in the apartment where you have, in that situation, you go to that chair and we do something positive.
Red chair, but the red chair is mostly on our nursing home. So, for example, would it be a good thing to buy that exact same chair and put it in her daycare as well? So she makes she uses the exact same red chair for calming period, or how you want to call it?
Hängen Sie doch.
Maybe you can simply post a picture of that red chair to a chair in daycare, then you don't have to buy a second chair. And you will also make your daughter more flexible. It doesn't need to be that chair. If you want to, you can of course buy the same chair again, but maybe a picture of that chair is already sufficient for her to realize this is my safe chair. Nicht unbedingt zwingend, aber möglich.
Ja.
Exactly. Not mandatory. There is nothing mandatory in this situation. What is helpful for one child can lead to opposite reactions from a different child. So you cannot have this one approach fits all situation. That is just simply not possible. This is one of the options where you create a calm space that supports the child calming down. You do that also when a child loses all of control and is overly excited, that you simply go to a different place. Another question is, or another option is, but that also requires the child to be capable of it, that you repeatedly ask, what is your level of excitement? You can also use the Lego bricks for that. So put as many out there as you are excited to make the child understand how to realize how excited the child is. For 1 or 2 weeks every day, you do that a couple of times. From 1 relaxed to 10 most tension possible, so that the child develops a feeling for differences. That is something you can support with this exercise. So development is also learning to differentiate these situations. That is an important step in development. You can also ask the child, how did you manage to only reach level 5 on that day and not to 10? You can deal with these situations. And you can tell the child, try to go to 10. Just give it your all and go to 10. And most of the times they don't manage to do so. But that also means that they cannot switch it on and off as they please. That is the one thing. And the other thing is go from 5 to 4. That is something that they can do. One, I was just briefly wanted to show that with these levels of excitement. Sometimes escalation phase is so short that you don't even realize the child is already at full power and you have not realized anything in advance. Sometimes there's triggers that you don't realize yourself, that you don't that you have no grasp of. When you yourself realize the child escalates a bit, then you have options to stop them. In the escalation phase, you can still reach the child. When it is relaxed and exhaustion, you can reach your child again. But in this highest level of exaggeration, when they lose control, you cannot speak to your child. The only option would be to use violence, and then it's important to change the location, or if somebody else is there to say, please, can you solve this situation, to make a change in the relationship, in the attachment figure, and the child realizes that the parents know what to do, and that already is a revelation. That is something that helps them. They might not know how to get me out of my situation, but they know how to deal with the situation. And the target is that the child learns how to deal with these situations and how to then self-regulate. We all needed to learn how we can calm down. I am not going into being agitated and upset, and it is difficult to influence one's own emotions. But that is this curve that you usually go through. So we take a break now, and we'll then continue with a couple of questions, and then deal with the topic of ADHD and autism.
We'll get together again at 10 to 11, 15 minutes of break. In the meantime, you might have further questions. I'm going to put these up front here, and if you have any questions, especially the ones you want to do anonymously, you can write them down and Herr Diegel will answer them. Okay?
Gut, dann machen wir weiter.
Then we continue. Is there another question? The children learned. Let me have a little. How can you teach a child to respect the borders or the limits of others? How can you learn that? The children learn to say stop when others do something that they don't like, but they also need to listen to other people telling them stop and not tell them others. I would practice that with a change in role. You do something together. One is saying stop, the other is saying stop. You practice saying stop. I would do that in a game. And with boys especially, I would have physical interaction with the parents saying stop. And where does the game stop? I would practice using stop with the children, and they can interrupt. You can also... Aanschakelen! everyone wants the toy and they want that toy, and you practice that. Je moet nog op A. Boven rechts. Boven rechts. Ja. Oh.
Zu. Ja, das ist wichtig. War da noch? Ist noch was unklar, oder?
English is audible. Do I need to repeat anything or repeat or no? So saying stop, it is important to practice that with your children. Parents and their child, they play the situation, they play the conflict. We take the role of two friends arguing about a toy, and you eventually say stop, and the other needs to react, and now you're the one saying stop if you go too far. The problem is that the children often don't realize that they go too far. They only realize when the other uses force to oppose them, and that is a difficulty. And that's how to practice. That you early on realize it becomes too much and I stop. And it also is important that you give positive feedback on very small steps also, that you don't take them as self-understood. The question is also, to what extent can I oppose someone, and where do I go beyond the limit? Can I take physical reaction when somebody starts hitting me? From an example of my work where a father practiced with his son, he kept being pushed over, how to quickly get up again, and they've practiced that at home. So everything that reduces the helplessness in the situation is beneficial for the child. And what I keep saying and seeing, the capability to calm down needs to be strengthened. After conflict, the children come to their parent and want to make sure that everything is okay, and we are still very exaggerated, very upbeat, and want to just hit them on the table and be done with it. But it's then you need to actively calm yourself down and say, good job on calming down. How did you manage to calm down? It's not that they know, but this question is already a confirmation, a positive confirmation. What else do we have? A child with strongly disharmonic behavior is difficult to determine. How can we realize what the child does not understand, or if it's just being difficult? So this separation in what is the disability and what is behavioral, you cannot separate that. It is always one. It's always one person. So challenge your child, because you are the ones who know your child best and realize when you're asking too much. For example, when supporting their independence, it's not that they spend the night at grandma's right away, but trust in your feeling. You're the one who knows your child best, but this separation is difficult. And can I be sure to recognize when I am asking too much of my child? But you have a good gut feeling on that. And what are signs of my child being overly demanded, over-challenged? Is there certain indicators? It starts moving, it is hectically running around. Those are indicators of an overly challenging situation for the child. And change process are getting used to something. We have tried everything and nothing helped. Why is that the case? On the one hand, because you face strong challenges. Here, the aggressive behavior towards the younger brother, who kept tormenting his younger brother. And the parent said, stop. The child is being taught, as soon as you start hitting your brother, we take you out of the situation. But eventually his reaction becomes stronger. He will start hitting the brother sooner, harder, but he has reacted to the change in situation. Parents said, we have tried, it only got worse, so they try something else. You call this unintentional immunization strategy, and the child becomes immune to change. It gets used to not changing. And that is why it's important to follow through until the child changes its behavior. When you want to try something new, do we have the power to stay strong? Because with children who are very active, for instance, you have that that is a very common reaction, that the old pattern strengthens and increases, and even further, so they do what we do as well. You want to print a letter and the printer doesn't print. You send the print order again. And once again, we tend to increase the dose in the old pattern, and only when that stops working, then we start looking at the cause and why things are not working, and children do the same. How to find balance, getting your kid to do what it needs to do without getting into arguments all the time. Our daughter needs clear and repetitive instructions to take time to go to the toilet, put on her shoes jacket. We find that we become irritated if we have to repeat the question 3 times on every occasion and raise our voice until she listens. A feeling of being annoyed is something that doesn't help you and doesn't help the child either. And the risk is that you preventively become annoyed because you will see it happen again. And you slide into this agitation, this annoyedness. So you need to disrupt that, you need to stop that. What could be is the child maybe learned to react only when the voice is raised. That doesn't mean that it is an easy to take care of child. But has it gotten used to only react, or is it reacting on the tone of voice, or does it only react once it realizes when the parents are annoyed, so that the annoyedness of the parents is the trigger for the child to react? And then the question is, how many repetitions are okay for a child? Is 3 times repeating okay? And can I maybe, instead of raising my voice, I can try to take a more direct approach? Hey, I'm talking to you. What is important is for you to leave this annoyedness behind. Things that keep repeating themselves are difficult to sustain. brushing the teeth every night. If it is an issue every night, then of course you're annoyed. If you only face trouble once a week, you're not annoyed. Even smaller things that keep repeating themselves lead to more annoyance. So once again, we need to realize children don't need to react the first time we say something that is not normal. If you ask 3 times and then they react, then it's okay. But how can I not raise my voice every time? Because it is difficult to bear. My child makes me raise my voice, which is contradictory to my understanding of upbringing. And then I get annoyed with my child because it makes me raise my voice. Let me make an example. I need a projectory surface, somebody to sit down here in the front. They don't need to do anything. Please, anyone. You just sit down, have a neutral expression on your face. I'll do everything. So you're the child and take a seat. Let's take a boy, ADHD symptomatics. You'd simply sit here, don't do anything. We need to reflect. Herr Diegel, Mikrofon. Danke. So what is my own emotional reaction where I'm very annoyed? And fictitiously I try to tell my child to simply express that for yourself, to not really say this to your child. You don't say anything, and you don't even move a brow, otherwise I will get someone else. So, I am so annoyed with you. It makes me throw up as soon as I ask you to do something. It is unbearable. I'm so happy when you're at school in the morning because I finally have a minute to myself. Sometimes I want to send you to the moon and I am so angry at you. So it is about reflecting what sometimes you have in your head, and no parent, there is no parent that doesn't have such a reaction. Part of a healthy mental situation is that you can distinguish between reality and what is in your head. What does it mean? Thank you. We will speak about that. What does it mean? A mother with a daughter with Down syndrome told me that her daughter keeps eating very noisily, and but I can't move away every time. What can I do? Both need to do something. So the mother will bear it a little better, and you eventually teach the daughter to eat with a little better manners. It's the own sensitivity that makes it difficult to bear it. There are things that annoy you. Everyone has things that annoy them, but the diagnostic indication is important. If it is sometimes happening to me and my child who has a positive relationship to their child, how do others deal with my child? So will my child keep making refusal experiences? Others won't let me play along because of the way my child is behaving. And if I already have that issue, even though I love my child, how do others react to my child who do not have that relationship to this child? So it is important. And sometimes, yes, it is over the top, and that is totally understandable. But you can, it can help you realize how others have, or how others perceive your child. And children who are being declined repeatedly, they of course take something from that as well. So your own annoyedness, you can use image cards, you can have small touch supporting your request. How can I move away from the raised voice? Children who are very, very committed in their activity, they don't hear. They simply, their ears are locked off. And if I'm very concentrated and somebody addresses me from the side, I don't realize. And I've had conflict due to that in the past. So, does the child only listen once you raise your voice or not? Children in their inner world, they do not hear what is said outside. So you need to go closer, you need to make it apparent that you mean this child. If the teacher in the front of the room says something from the front, you need to make it apparent that, yes, I am talking to you, you need to also take out your workbook. This is the nursery of my younger daughter. This was the normal standard for quite some time. I'll do one question before we go back to the topic. Our child is quite affectionate in the sense that she wants to be close to us, cuddle us, know where we are all the time, and preferably be near us all the time. How can we find a balance between giving her the comfort that she's asking for, while at the same time preparing her to be an independent adult, as far as that is possible given the Jacobson syndrome? First step. How can we get her to do that less? Instead of going to what do we allow her? So we leave the no you cannot and change it to yes you can. What dose would be acceptable to us? And how can we make our child realize that not always is cuddle time? Children need to learn that you can't touch people just because you want to, but you have to have a realization that you can touch at the moment, because it's always continuous development to make the child realize you cannot always touch, but that is independent of our relationship. It's not possible because we don't like you, it's not possible because it's inappropriate. That is one item, or one point. From a Lebenshilfe-institutions, there was one person coming home from work who wanted to then sit in the lap of her favorite caregiver at over 20, and the caregiver said, it's too much for me, and in the end she will say that I don't like her anymore. But this patient realized that there is reluctancy, and what was the reaction? Well, more of that, so she wanted to even further. We use a stoplight with red and green. When it's red, you can't come sit in my lab. So go away from prohibition, but I allow you to do that in certain situations. You need to learn that you need to be given permission, and you need to feel that permission. That is an important step in development. That is one issue. Then you can further different contexts, family relations, peers, activities like sport, hobby activities, for example with Lebenshilfe. Then the question is, what can the child do itself? Can it already get dressed on its own? And what do we want to promote? I would also further that in small steps, that other people play a role, not only the parents. Be close to us all the time. There is a certain disorder in children. In extreme cases, emotional emotional distress with fear of separation that also has physical components like queasiness and stomach pain. So the child is about to go to school and they have an upset stomach, but there is no organic reason for this pain, but they feel an upset stomach, and that is fear of separation in a or separation anxiety in a very strong situation. Small children want to know when they are in kindergarten, where are you, what are you doing? And when they are late for picking up, then already they have a panic. I was doing groceries and I met some people, but I can't talk to them because I need to go pick up the child. But that is a pressure situation for the parents all the same. Where do you go? Where do you go shopping? The children want to get reassurance. But you can treat it very well with very, very small steps of confrontation. In primary school age, children who often are absent due to illness have this fear of anxiety of separation. And that is a fear that they cannot verbalize because they cannot say what the problem is because there's no object that they're afraid of. Fear of a dog, I have an object, or the teacher is arguing with me. But if they come home, then they are often accused of simulating. But that is something that could be the situation here, that they have too strong a form of separation anxiety, that the separation takes too present form in the children. We've discussed earlier that we make the presentation available to you, that you get it as a PDF and can have it translated. In the meantime, that should not be too much of an issue anymore. Let me interrupt this. We can continue later on.
Gut.
Moving on to this topic. what are classical symptoms? At the time, it was hyperactivity until it was realized that this attention disorder is the main aspect and that hyperactivity can be added but doesn't have to be. So there is a general deficit in self-regulation, very impulsive. So children who always go a little overboard, they have a difficult temper. They are also very
Wenn diese Hyperaktivität dazu kommt, die ständige Unruhe. Ich hatte also Kinder, die musste ich immer wieder unterm Tisch hervorholen, weil die dann so unruhig und unter den Tisch gerutscht sind.
Collect from under the table. Warum geht das aus? Can you manage sitting still for 1 minute? And he sat down, and it was so difficult for that child to sit on that chair for 1 whole minute. The problem is to get a crystal clear diagnosis. It is it is proof on indication only, on indices only. You need a lot of data. There's only circumstantial evidence. And a doctor that says ADHD after 20 minutes, that is just negligent, because there's a lot to do before you have a crystal clear diagnosis. You don't need to read it all. Those are the official diagnosis criteria. Being unattentive, smaller mistakes, they don't follow orders, they have slips, they are reluctant with tasks that need longer attention spans, loses objects, is easily distracted and forgetful with daily activities. That is the attention category. The hyperactivity and impulsivity is constant movement. They leave their seat in school, run around, climb things, and in climbing has no realization of danger. The child does not, or is not capable of realistically understand the danger as it faces. It is not capable of silent games. It's always jumping around, speaks a lot, often interrupts with the answers, cannot wait, interrupts or disturbs others. But for these, it doesn't sound too dramatic, but for these children, there's an extreme occurrence, and that often leads to secondary problems because the children are problematic. They then have other issues, and then they, for instance, start becoming aggressive. And in a therapy, you need to start there first, and not in the ADHD symptomatic. Because first of all, we need to make sure the child gets along other children better before we start dealing with the other situations, and that's what makes it so difficult. There's also for adults the Wender-Utah criteria, where it is a little different. With permanent irritability is common, and when they've had the diagnosis in children, it is also more commonly visible in adults. What do we do to treat? As I said, diagnosis should not be done in the first 3 years because it is still too undecisive or too uncertain. You can have ergotherapy or speech therapy, early help, but that is not sufficient for treatment. You can add other things if there's motoric issues, language issues. The first step is to educate the parents on the issues so that the parents see my child does not do it because it cannot do that yet, and not because it wants to traumatize us. We assume that somebody who repeatedly does something, they do it on purpose. And we often assume that a child does something on purpose, but if it is on purpose, then it is not an issue, because then it is.
Also absichtlich ist psychologisch gesehen immer besser als unabsichtlich.
Morally, it's not an issue. And then it's that is oftentimes the children reach a point where they cannot take a different route out, but that's exactly what they need to learn, that they can regulate themselves better, which is why the parents are always very involved in this treatment. And then the diagnosis needs to be differentiated very well, and when it's necessary, then you need then you need to go take medication, but not automatically. This is a multimodal.
Aufklärung, dann, wenn schon so ein Kreislauf in der Familie ist, dann kann man das ADHS mal vergessen. Dann muss man an dem Kreislauf arbeiten, dass die wieder miteinander können. Vorher braucht man gar nicht anzufangen mit den weiteren Schritten. Und da geht es eben, es gibt auch zum Beispiel spezielle Angebote für Eltern-Kind, Kommunikation. Dann ist ein wichtiger Schritt die Behandlung des Kindes. Da gibt es verschiedene Verfahren, wie man mit den Kindern Selbstregulation trainiert, zielgerichtetes Verhalten und so weiter. Da gibt es einiges Angebote, die sehr wirksam sind. Die Arbeit mit den Eltern als Erziehungsperson, Elterntraining gibt es, und gut wäre natürlich dann auch eine Kindergruppe dann irgendwann mal, wo es darum geht, wie komme ich mit anderen klar. Also es wäre jetzt ideal, wenn es so wäre. Oft gibt es die Kindergruppen nicht. Und bei der Medikation, das muss vom Arzt begleitet werden. Also er muss das kontrollieren, er muss die Dosis überwachen, ob es zu viel ist, zu wenig. Das ist also ganz wichtig. Das reicht nicht, das mal zu verschreiben und fertig, sondern der Arzt muss einen Blick drauf haben. Okay. Und das andere wäre natürlich auch so, zu gucken, dass die Eltern auch sich nicht aus dem Auge verlieren. So. Es gibt zum Beispiel ein Programm dafür, das so im deutschen Raum untersucht wurde mit sehr guten Wirkungen. Therapieprogramm für Kinder mit hyperkinetischem oppositionellen Problemverhalten. In anderen Ländern gibt es vergleichbare Angebote. Und da gab es auch eine Langzeitstudie. Man hat zum Beispiel geguckt, also die Verhaltenstherapiegruppe war wirksam und die Verhaltenstherapiegruppe plus Medikament war wirksam, beides. Man hat aber festgestellt, also die war sogar ein bisschen besser mit Medikamenten. Man hat aber festgestellt, wo man nach Jahren die Kinder nochmal untersucht hat, gab es keinen Unterschied. Also die Medikamentenvergabe hilft in den akuten Situationen, dass die Kinder ansprechbar sind. Ja. Aber das hat nicht diese Langzeitwirkung. Deshalb heißt Therapie nur mit Medikamenten bei ADHS ist zu kurz gegriffen. Sie finden halt oft die Therapieplätze nicht, das ist das Problem. Aber die Medikamente allein bringen dem Kind nicht bei, bestimmte Dinge zu lernen. Die Kinder sind zugänglicher, das ist manchmal ein Unterschied wie Tag und Nacht, wenn es gut funktioniert. Aber sie müssen ja trotzdem lernen, das muss ja vermittelt werden. Ja.
Der geht ständig aus. Ich mache nichts, der geht aus.
Therapieplätze gibt und sie brauchen auch jemanden, der sich mit der Problematik auskennt. Ja.
From the Döpfner group, there is books for parents. With options on how to react at home. There are other concepts, systemic concepts, deep psychological concepts, and there's neurofeedback. With the children learning to change their state of brain, so calming down via neurofeedback. That is a lot of training. So with their thoughts only, they need to direct a rocket on a screen to a target. It works if by them calming down. It needs a lot of training. And now you have an ADHD child that doesn't want to stick to one task for a long time. So that is not very common. There's also unserious offers where it is said that people do neurofeedback, but that is nonsense. And ergotherapy and healing pedagogy. There is also therapists who have received special training. Diet usually is not helpful. When you add sugar to children, they become overactive. That is a common reaction in the child. You have medication. When the diagnosis is well done, and it is not a diagnosis done on assumptions, then it helps in 75% of cases. It needs to also be supervised by the doctor, but you should also leave the medication out. But the teachers should not know about that, because they are offended when they realize you still have the guarantee that it still works. When the school does not give any feedback, then you can leave it out. You need to leave medication out to see if it is still effective, but you don't need to give the child the medicine when it is no longer effective or not needed anymore. But it is an effective medication, and I've seen it myself in a boy, a very strong athlete, and he was unable to pass a certain boundary due to drugs. He needed a special certificate, or he needed to stop his medication because otherwise he would have an advantage. It was not so easy for him. Well, one important point is when things become tapered, grow more acute, then we change our perception. Children with aggression disorder, they see an adverse environment. Why did you hit him? Because he looked at me like that. The other is at fault and I only defended myself. If the teacher is then punished by the child, then the child is receives confirmation that the teacher does not like me, it only leads to a confirmation of this negative perception that everyone is against me, which is why punishment increases the negative interpretation pattern, and they have revenge thoughts. I need to pay them back. They have very few options to resolve conflict, that you can have different approach to argument. You can yell at each other, you can go away, you can use swear words, and especially in group therapy, these situations are then being handled. And the consequences of aggressive action is seen as positive, and they overestimate their competences. If others accept what I'm doing, then that is a wrong perception, and they repeat their own old patterns. So in very severe cases of ADHD, you have this aggressive issue added, and if that becomes more and more towards other people, other situations, then it is very important to take action, because these aggressive behaviors have a bad prognosis, and you should take action. And alone they cannot leave that behind. On the diagnosis, this is what you need to have a well-founded diagnosis. You need information from the parents. You need to be in touch with the child. You have to have a discussion with the family. You have to look at them while playing. You need feedback from school or kindergarten, and also look at them there to observe their behavior. You need medical neurological assessment, and also psychological test evaluation, intelligence, attention span, concentration, perception, capability of solving problems, and social emotional capabilities. Do I have that? I have an example for that later. So you need a lot of information to make an ADHD assumption. The test evaluation takes a couple of visits. I've done psychological test evaluation because the SBZ, in German it's Sozialberatungszentrum, was overbooked. And I think it is important because it is a severe diagnosis. ADHD is just like autism is. What you can do as a parent is, I've had parents who sat there and they could for 1 hour talk about what was terrible and bad and hard, and I asked them, what do you still like in their child? And they had to think. And you get into that rail, you have a pattern of thought. And when you ask, how was last week? They say everything was terrible. And to look at every day what was okay and what was bad, then of course they realize that there is better and worse days. And it's of them leaving that trail behind and take a differentiated approach that not all days are the same. Looking back, everything is the same. This you all are aware of with children who are very active. To have a very subjective crossing, or was he overly active today, and was it very strong? I'm cross 3, and I have a sum, and then I have a fever curve. And with this boy, it was clear on weekends he was much more easily to bear than on school days. But if you don't do it like that, then you don't realize. There is online questionnaires, but that is not a replacement for any diagnosis. This also is from Mr. Döpfner and Lemkuhl, who've done a lot in this area. And I think I also have one. And this is also the parent questionnaire by Connors in English, also available online if you look for it. What about school? On the one hand, school is clear structures, clear borders, and real rules. You need teachers who are strong personalities and who will put their foot down. It is not about authoritative behavior, it's about strength. Regardless of what you do, I firmly stand my ground. And the teacher needs a feeling for what does the child need, or is maybe targeted support necessary. There is a lot of support lacking in schools because there is lack of funding, there is no staff. And in therapy it's always on working together and also to go to the school or to have support from an integration supporter in kindergarten. Does anybody of you have experience with that? That somebody went with their child to kindergarten? Do you make use of that? If your child goes to kindergarten and the caregivers say it's difficult with them, there is the option for certain times to have specially trained caregiver to support the kid. That is individual integration in kindergarten. And the example with the autistic boy with the safe harbor, that is what the integration specialist did, my colleague. We have one question over here. One question here. Not necessarily a question, but with these integration specialists for school, I'm too fast. We have had the experiences that when you request it, it takes almost a year for this to be assigned, to be granted. And after approval, we were told that you need to wait 12 to 15 months before you get that specialist assigned, but that's negligent. You cannot have the child wait that long. That is unacceptable. In our district, we've said that it takes 6 to 8 weeks for the measure to be granted. It is, in the meantime, difficult to get an appointment with the SPZ. You need months for an appointment. That is something that needs to happen very quickly. An adult can wait for a therapy to start, but a child cannot wait. Their development does not stop. But that is the districts who are at fault here, and with the parties funding these measures, they need people that they can take over. But some have employment situations that are simply unbearable for the people making that job. But it is a negligent situation. If a child needs help and it is not being granted, you have a claim for that support. Children have a legal claim to development support, and they are being denied that claim when there is too long wait time. All right. Briefly on this subject, the most important is cooperation of the parents. And if you have different approaches to raising your child, then you need to align those approaches, that those different upbringing approaches. Oftentimes it is the topic, you're too strict, you're too lenient. That is a topic often. And there are children who need a very narrow, a very tight framework, a lot of boundaries, and their siblings need fewer and less. And it does not mean that a child that can prosper under a wider framework does have to suffer the narrow framework because the sibling needs that. And it is important that the children feel that they are strong, and that they are that you are strong as a parent, and that you do what you say. When in the morning getting dressed is always taking a lot of time, and I've repeatedly said, next time I'll take you just like that, and you're not dressed, would you do that? And the answer then is, I would never. And the child learns that I do not have to listen to what my mother says. If you say it, you need to do it. So next time you do it. But you give your son the opportunity. You take the clothes along in the car, and the child got dressed in the car, or the child was dressed in the cars, but it was done. And with a girl, every time I put out, it's difficult and there's a struggle. You put 2-3 options out, the child chooses one, and the situation is done. We always think it needs to be like this and like that, and the child needs to do it like this or like that, but there's always a different approach. Then education of the parents. Can I interpret the child's behavior as the child doesn't understand, or understands but doesn't do it? Maybe make a list of what I dislike about my child and what I like about my child, 10 points each. Is it already that late? Yes, it is that late. Let me interrupt briefly. There's no main topics that I can briefly talk about autism. Is that okay for you? It moves. Microphone, yep. On autism. It is, in the meantime, a spectrum of autism because it ranges from the most severe forms of mental disorder to a very slight digression of normal in Asperger's. And the diagnosis is very, very effortful. You need special training and special approaches. I can maybe give circumstantial diagnosis that then needs to be confirmed. What is typical for autism? It's social aspects. that they have trouble recognizing facial expressions, that they don't use these signals themselves, and that communication is affected when they tell something. They simply keep going, and they have no perception of that the other maybe is not interested anymore. It has a very mechanic component. They talk about something, and their response is, we're now in that topic. Delayed or no language development at all, limited interest in stereotypical patterns of behavior, stereotypical behavior, language patterns that they repeat syllables, resistance to change. Parents tried to straighten an askew picture on the wall, but the kid could not bear it, and it was acting up until the picture was askew again. Anxiety, sleeping and eating disorder, aggressions, and the fewer option to express in language, the more there is a risk for self-injury, and oftentimes they have no realization of pain. When you look at the distribution, you see the yellow area is a very strong mental disorder. So many children have a severe mental disorder. This burgundy area is a lighter form, and an IQ normal is only this little blue area, and the most severe impairment is then the turquoise. So in general, people with autism, you think of those who are super capable of something. And globally there are 80 people who have these super capabilities in autism, but it is usually a situation where the child is severely impaired. The theory of mind is a topic. Can I recognize other people's emotions and understand them? And can I make conclusions on their intentions? Children with autism have difficulty learning that, and they take everything ad verbatim. We have a subjective theory on the functioning of people, and because we have similar understandings, we talk to each other and we understand each other. The other thing is something that I do to close. Central coherence. Can I integrate individual pieces of information to a complete picture? You see an image, a story in images here, and the sequence is wrong. And the task is to put the pictures in the right sequence so that they make a story. So from individual pictures making a story. And that is something that they find extremely difficult. They see the details. This is what it should look like. We can understand that story and what happens one after the other and what story that is. And that is called central coherence. And that is something where autistic children have difficulties, and they are stuck in detail. Let me have a look at treatment briefly. There is very specific forms of treatment with communication training to further their options on communication. You've yesterday heard something on supported communication. That is what is being used. You use tablets. you have treatment of secondary problems, and there we need to educate the parents on the problems and that they can understand what type of child they have. There's very special therapeutic approaches that are very, very aufwendig, complex. You can do a lot of things, but the underlying problem remains this TEACH approach, treatment and education of autistic and related communication handicapped children, with visualization where space is separated off to create a calm zone. There is special watches for artists where a red disc is moving to tell them how much time is left for the task that I'm given with the time timer. This we leave out. That's something you find online. Diagnostic features. Okay. On the dot, 12 o'clock. No microphone, no interpretation. We did not get to the questions, but I am available over the course of the afternoon. So if you have questions, you can address me directly. All right. Thank you.
Ich möchte Ihnen sehr gerne
I would like to thank you for your presentation, for your time. We have a little present for you as well. You will still be here in the afternoon. You have a couple of appointments with families. We will tell you about those. It was a little difficult for me to shorten this information down to I sometimes take 1 or 2 days to relay that information.
till